Hello, seekers. Welcome back, friends, to another episode of Divine Journeys. I'm your host, Bernie Slowy, and today I have a divine feminine with me, Waxela Sananda. Welcome,
Hi, Bernie.
Sheila.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.
Oh, Sheila, I love your name.
I do too, actually. Thank you.
It is so unique. And so tell me about Sananda. You had shared with me something very interesting about what it means.
Whoa, that is a big like conversation to start with, but I'm happy to start there. So Sananda is a Sanskrit name. Ananda means joy. And I was saying you can remember Ananda, that's joy in Sanskrit. Sananda is a lot of people think of Sananda as the oversoul that a lot of the masters that have been on our planet came from. It is where Jesus came from, where, a lot of the masters, Buddha, and honestly, when I tune into Sananda, it's a massive collective. And so if anybody were to say, like, I would never say I am the Sananda, that's way off. Like, nobody can say that. There's a huge collective that is Sananda that holds all of the truth seekers, the star seeds, the light workers, the healers, most all came from the Sananda ray. And so we are all Sananda. And I got that name. That wasn't obviously my birth name, but when I married the man that I was traveling with, who's a shaman and a walk-in, we received that as a family name from our connection and channel with Sananda. And so that's how I ended up with that last name.
Oh, I love that because for today's episode, I wanted to be able to give the audience an idea about what is a galactic shaman because we're all in different phases and journeys of our lives. But what was so interesting as you shared that with me is that most people probably, don't know what the symptoms and signs are for spiritual awakening. And the fact that we're all Sanandas in some degree is exactly why we were meant to start with that, so that those who are listening today understand that they're being drawn to their own divine journeys and why they were probably drawn to this very interview. So with
Absolutely.
Sheila,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So with Sheila, tell us about your background first, about so that as you share your moment of your spiritual awakening, where did you grow up? Where are you from?
Okay, well, I was born and raised in Iowa at a lake called Okoboji, and it was a very rural, quiet, Christian town. Very, most of the people there are Scandinavian descent or Dutch. So most people look a lot like me. And I was an odd one out there
Well, in the Midwest.
in the Midwest.
And I also
Yes,
grew up in the Midwest. And so, yes, to be able to have these kind of dialogues probably didn't happen very much.
it didn't. No, not with the people in my life. It was happening with the esoteric beings in my life, which were very prevalent from the time I from my earliest memories from my youth. But they always told me, don't tell the adults, they won't understand. And so I didn't talk about it with adults, and it wasn't spoken about. There wasn't anyone in my immediate world that was on a different type of spiritual journey than the church one. So it wasn't something that I even realized other people knew about until I was a teenager, went on a trip with my family and walked into a metaphysical bookstore. And I was like, whoa, other people too.
And then, so as you were, growing up, and did you have anyone else in your family, perhaps? Was it something maybe your mother was interested in or a grandparent?
You know, it's interesting. It wasn't something that was like anybody was out about in the family, but I would have some very interesting talks with my mother. We would do these drives to see her family periodically throughout the year, and she and I would go together, and my dad and brother would drive separately. So we would get into these really deep philosophical topics, and I was quite young, and that was one of my favorite things. We would just talk about like where humanity came from and extraterrestrial life and all these like really interesting concepts and what it's all about. And then later I realized that she was actually in trance channeling to me during that time. My mom's very spiritual, but she's never really explored the metaphysics side so much. And I asked her, so as an adult, I'm like, do you remember those talks we would have on the way? These are really cool, deep, esoteric talks. She's like, no, I don't remember any of that. I'm like,
Hmm.
yeah, she was channeling that.
Well, share more about your spiritual awakening experience.
Yeah, so that, I mean, I don't feel like I just had a spiritual awakening. Like I know a lot of people kind of burst open at some point and they have an aha moment. For me, it was gradual. It's been a gradual sort of unfolding since I mentioned my very early youth. I was just a small child, 2, 3 years old when I started having visitations from non-physical beings or physical beings that don't look like us, esoteric beings or whatever you want to call them, ETs, the whole works. And so I was awake to something was happening in my life that isn't happening for others. And I see things that other people don't see. I was aware of that much. As a small child, you don't know any different than what you're experiencing. And then as I got older, I sort of tried to, you want to fit in when you're a teenager, when you're in high school and all that. So I kind of tried to brush that under the rug and not like have anybody know that about me. And then I started to really embrace it when after my high school graduation, I was an exchange student. I didn't get to choose where I was going. They sent me to Merida, Mexico, and the Yucatan Peninsula, where there's lots of Mayan ruins. And so I would go to the Mayan ruins on these trips, and I remember I started to open up and have memories of being Mayan and being in like when we'd tour the pyramids and particularly Chichen Itza. I loved that. I started having lots of memories. And so that I would say is a type of awakening because I started thinking, oh no, that's not how we did it. We did it like this. And then I'm like, why am I thinking that way? That's weird because I hadn't really even considered past lives and that whole concept at that point. I was 17. And then I really started to unfold rapidly. That's the year I came back. I discovered metaphysical bookstores. I discovered Shirley MacLaine, who led me to Edgar Casey and channeling and all that stuff, and started automatic writing, meditating, having out of body experiences, things like that year.
So, after going to Chichen Itza, was that maybe a little bit of an activator, you would say?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. The sacred sites in our world, and even just sites that you've been at before, you can plant things like it's kind of in, I would say, codes. So you can plant codes in this reality for yourself to find before you come here, or thinking linearly, you're planning, okay, here's my journey. This is what it's going to be like. I'm going to end up going here. I'm going to pick up this code, sort of have a download and be like, oh, now I'm on a new trajectory. And that's why I feel like people are so drawn to go, like knowing one of them for me was Kauai. I knew I had to go to
Mhm.
Kauai.
So beautiful.
And ended up spending 3 years there. My daughter was born there, but had massive awakening there. But that was something I inserted into my reality for myself to unfold into and have that experience.
So, for example, Sedona is known for its vortexes.
Yeah,
So, is that another example of
sure.
like a venerated place that has that energy that people could also feel an activation within themselves?
Absolutely. Yeah, there are certain places that are really promoters of activations and awakenings, and then there will be other places that are maybe more personal to the individual. But there are definitely hubs, absolutely. And Sedona would be a hub for spiritual activity and awakening.
That's
Yeah.
where I loved holding retreats because of that it's the energy that Sedona has, but also other places like Machu Picchu or
Mhm.
Stonehenge. So those who might be interested as far as like, how do I get this experience? Like with Sheila, if they can't go to Chichen Itza, which is in Yucatan, Mexico,
Yep.
those that want to even just stay in the US, do you know of other places in the US that have this same kind of opportunity
Yeah.
vibe?
Absolutely. So, first of all, if you're feeling called somewhere in your heart, or if some place keeps showing up in your reality and you're hearing about it over and over and over, that's a cue from yourself that, okay, that's somewhere that I need to go. And that could be an activation place. But honestly, you do not have to physically go. If you consciously choose, you can, I mean, we have these bodies, but we're not limited. Consciousness cannot be limited to a body. So somebody might hear this and say, oh, Chichen Itza or Machu Picchu or whatever it is, like, I really want to go there. It's not something I can do right now, but you can watch a documentary on it and you can get a picture of it and you can bring that, learn a little bit about it and then bring that into your meditation, and you can travel there in your consciousness and visit that way and also pick up codes. You just get to be way more intentional about how you do that versus just showing up there in your physical body and hoping something happens. And either way is great. You can do both. You can have the meditation, set yourself up and then go, or you can receive all of that. When you do that, you can
Sure.
send that energy. You can also receive energy from certain locations that way and, pick up those codes without even having to go anywhere.
I really get excited about when you talk about, I think you were either referring to like being remotely,
Remote. Yeah.
it's remote,
Thank you.
but your intention is what is so powerful of what
Mhm.
you're wanting to receive or experience. So that even as you're watching a video, you may not be there, but if the intention for you is to experience as though you are and to receive whatever the magic or the energy from there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. And we're just so multidimensional that a lot of people think it's all about the body, and our bodies are very important and special and wonderful. They're a great technology. They're our avatar while we're here, but we are so much bigger than the body. So if you are physically, um, for lack of a better word, stuck in a certain place, or you're not able to travel, or you're, for whatever reason, unable to go to places that you want to go, absolutely you can access those places without physically having to go. And it's all about intention and really opening up to receive the codes of that place, to receive that this is an encoded reality. So everything is code. We can receive code from, I mean, from anything, from looking at an insect crawling on the grass, or the sky, or a bird, or listening to a podcast, or meditating. It's just a matter of being open.
Well, you sound like a shaman, and that is exactly what you describe yourself to be, as this galactic shaman and embodied ascension trainer. So,
Yeah.
Sheila, explain to us what exactly is a galactic shaman?
Sure. Yeah. So, it's kind of funny because I didn't like, people are like, how did you get your training for that? I didn't set out to take a training to be a galactic shaman. I had my training. I went through, some intense stuff in my life. And then I sat with my guidance, my channel, if you want to call it my higher self, but my team. And one day I'm like, what do I call myself that holds the essence of who I am in the world and what I represent? And I heard very clearly, galactic shaman. You are a galactic shaman. I'm like, okay, I get that. And so for me, it might be a little different. It's not like I took a training course and, checked all the boxes and took a test and passed as a galactic shaman. I had life experiences that led me to be that. But what that really is for me, is that I have been, I've mentioned several times already, getting code or getting downloads, opening up to your team. And I've been met by non-physical beings and extra, or, not, not our typical human beings ever since my earliest memories. So they have been training me all along the way. And then I got to travel for 3 years with a shaman who was a galactic being, who walked in to the body of someone who was basically crossing over, who was ending his life. And then when that body was healed, that being left, but he trained me very intensely for 3 years. So a lot of the training that I had was through him, and he came into the body through the galactic very directly. So he didn't even have to go through the forgetting process of who he was. He had direct access. And then I was able to ask him. It was, this is before cell phones. This was in the late 90s, before we had cell phones, before we had, computers and laptops. And it was like traveling with having that access to, I was going to say Wikipedia, but way better than, way beyond that, like Google, for spiritual, anything I had, anything I wanted to ask, anything I wanted to know, all I had to do was ask, and it was immediately given to me through him channeling.
So, how is a galactic shaman different from traditional shamanic practices?
Right. So I will say for me, and there are other galactic shaman. Actually, there are a lot of us, and others might identify differently. I'm just telling you from my experience, which is unique to me. And so everybody's going to have their own version of this. But a traditional shaman is a medicine person. So shaman is a medicine holder or carrier person. A lot of the traditional shaman come from tribal, they've handed down their knowledge through their lineage and passed that along. And then they work with, many of them, with herbs, with plant medicines, but that's one category of what a shaman does. They also work with earth energies and sky energies and extraterrestrial energies. So there is an aspect of crossover in that. I would say pretty much all shaman speak and communicate with the divine and with beings that a lot of people aren't even aware of or don't see. We are specifically trained to be able to see and communicate and interact with those non-physical beings, or beings that aren't just human, from, I think, mostly from a very young age. And certainly some people have been trained later in life, but I was trained from a very young age, even though I didn't grow up in a tribal type of environment.
Well, what you're talking about, especially, I've learned about star seeds, and that many of us are. And that's kind of part of the spiritual awakening, is that we realize that we're remembering a little bit about who we are originally. And I think we all go through a process. Like every 10 years, to me, it seems like our soul is asking for growth, expansion, ascension. So, as what you're explaining as an embodied ascension trainer, how do you explain the concept of embodied ascension and why it's important for spiritual growth?
Sure. So ascension, just to clear up, like the way that I define ascension, a lot of people, like biblically, think of ascension as going out of body and going up to heaven or to a higher realm, and your spirit leaving your body, or you're just like taking your body to a whole new place. And embodied ascension is you're not giving up your body, you're staying in your body, but you are raising the frequency not only of your consciousness, but of your physical body. And so something that happens a lot of times when someone has a spiritual awakening, they get expanded, their consciousness expands, right? So suddenly it's like, I don't feel like I fit in this body anymore. My consciousness is like out here. And I was saying, I feel like that's where woo woo actually came from. Because a lot of people that are, their consciousness has expanded, they get out of body and they're like all happy hanging out here. But it's really hard to be in the physical body then after that. And that's where people just aren't grounded and they're not like very effective in their physical lives because they haven't embodied their vehicle and they're out here all woo woo and like maybe accessing some great stuff, but you've got to be able to bring that in. So that is the embodiment part. Embodied ascension is raising the frequency of your body. Usually the way that it goes, you're raising the frequency of your body in order to match and be a greater container for your consciousness so that you can have an integrated physical experience. And it is an ongoing journey. It's not something that you do one time or take my 6-month course and then you're done. But that, like I have learned over my process, which has been, my whole life, that there are some things that really work to help us anchor into this body. And when we do those things, life gets a lot easier and it gets easier. Like we just want to have a safe, beautiful, comfortable place that is our body to hold our spirit, where it's okay to come into and where we can feel good and we can interact with the world in the way that we're designed to. And there's so much inundation in the world. First of all, we're not trained to raise our body consciousness, our frequency from an early, from childhood. We are inundated with junk food and polluted air and dirty water and chemicals and all kinds of, face and skin and hair products and, all kinds of things that are not helping us raise the frequency of our body. And so there are just all kinds of things and physical things. I'm also into biohacking, which is a way to upgrade the physical body and then add the spiritual component to that so that we can really hold our spirits in a more profound way in the physical.
Well, Sheila, describe more of what biohacking is for our audience.
Okay, sure. I just came from a 3-day biohacking conference and it's something I
Great
love.
timing.
I know. I love it. It's so much fun. Biohacking is about it's really about health and wellness. Number one, having the healthiest body that you can. It is not about big pharma or pharmacology. It's really about things that everybody can do. And there are lots of different areas of it. So food is a huge one. There's lots of food hacks that we can do to eat healthy and get the toxic stuff out of our lives, out of our bodies. It's about cleansing and detoxing. It's about strengthening, building muscle, and eliminating unhealthy fat from the body, especially that visceral fat around the organs. It's very physical stuff. And I just got introduced to biohacking about 5 years ago, and that was through Thaddeus Owen and Heidi Syme, who I met. They did a biohacking mastermind, and they are very spiritual. And she's a Kundalini yoga instructor. And they found out I was a galactic shaman in the area, invited me to talk at one of their events. And then we just created this beautiful thing. We put on retreats together now, but where we can partner biohacking and spirituality because it's the perfect combination to upgrade your body and your spirit and then have embodied ascension.
Well, the embodied ascension is very much the alignment of your body, mind, heart, and spirit. So
Yeah.
it makes sense to also have the biohacking so that if our body is not going to be nurtured to vibrate at its highest level, then it's going to be a lot more difficult to have all of that harmony and the centering, right? So
Yeah.
when you talk about biohacking, it's really a lot of probably having to reconstruct a little bit of ourselves at the cellular level because we probably don't grow up believing that we can actually heal ourselves and that our body is so intelligent that it's like you're going back to school for a different reason. You're having to like re-educate yourself, your mind, in order for your body to truly activate and do what it was meant to do, right?
Yeah, that is right. That is right. And we do have the ability, ultimately, and I'm a huge meditator and I've been meditating, since my teenage years. that our minds are so powerful. We really, if we were using more capacity of our minds, and when we do, I should really phrase it that way, when we engage more of our mental capacity, we really don't need any of the extra stuff. We don't need supplements. We don't need doctors. We don't need, because we can heal ourselves, but we have not been taught that. We really have been indoctrinated to believe in order to be well, I have to do this and that, and go to this practitioner and that practitioner. What we need to do to be well is to be mentally well and to take good care of our body, eat good food. And even that's questionable because there are people that are breatharian. They don't even eat food and they're healthy when they're doing it the right way. So food is even, we've been told we have to eat however many meals a day and all that. No, there, if we are trained properly and mentally using more of what we know ourselves to be, then you don't even have to eat food. But don't just stop eating food, because if you did that, you might die. We can also, like, one thing that was brought up at the biohacking conference, dry fasting. I've always been afraid of dry fasting, which is fasting without water, with nothing. I've done extended wet fasting, but I've never done a dry fast. And that is kind of going to be next level for me, I think, to try that out.
Oh, yeah, that's really interesting because I think most people understand that, you're, especially right now, as I'm appreciating my body on a different level, being through menopause and how hormones play such a factor in our life changes in those decades that I was talking about, the 40s and 50s, 40s being perimenopausal, 50s, we start to experience the menopause. So you start to hear about how, especially right now, everybody's talking about like being bloated and the belly fat and the cortisol. And so the intermittent fasting, that is very different than what you're talking about with the dry fasting.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah.
so now, as some of our audience may be looking at as far as, okay, if I'm supposed to be reliant on my body, what if somebody is like, but I need a kickstart first? Like sometimes maybe the, we can't just turn the switch overnight necessarily.
No.
So how would you walk through with someone who's ready to take on that more embodied ascension, but they also maybe need to take the baby steps?
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because I do have a degree in holistic nutrition, but I'm not a nutritionist. That's not the practice that I went into. So I have a lot of knowledge and it's fascinating to me, but I'm, like anything I say is not medical advice. Let's just say that. um, so I would have someone, I mean, if someone's really interested in the fasting along with it, this is not part of embodied ascension. But it's something that I do. And if I have people in that program that want information on that, they can. But I'm like, it's enough to teach people how to do this stuff without telling them what to eat. People get really cranky when you start to tell them what to eat. But I will say, if you're someone who wants to do a dry fast and really go to that extreme level or become breatharian, you don't just do it overnight. There's a whole process that you go through in order to get there. And intermittent fasting, which is having an eating window and extending the non-eating window, that's the way that you start, and you keep lengthening that window where it gets your eating phase gets shorter and shorter, that period of time that you eat during the day, until then you move into, and maybe you're also eating less and less food, and then you go to liquids, and then you go to water, and then eventually you go to no water, but you do not dry fast for an extended time. There are ways to do that. I'm not qualified to teach people. I did listen in on some great talks about it this weekend, but that's something you would want to get medical help, if you're going to do a dry fast, because you don't want to just wing that, you want to do that in a way that's healthy for all of you. So on the embodied ascension side, what we're doing is we're really bringing in frequencies. I work a lot with frequency and codes. So we are, first of all, before you can bring new stuff in, you got to let some old stuff go. So there's a whole phase of becoming a witness to what you're triggered by and reacting to in your life and in your environment. And then changing your relationship with those things. So this is the mindset piece that's really important. If you're letting the external world control you, and if you're behaving as if you're a victim, you are not going to get very far in the world of ascension. You've got to start to be responsible for everything in your life. Take responsibility, not just take responsibility, be responsible, getting that I am the creator of all of this. I am the creator of my life. Everything that shows up is here because I somehow magnetize that to me, whether I like it or not. And how am I responsible for that? And when you start to be in that mindset of I am responsible for this, that's when you can get really powerful at, oh, well, I put that person there that's agitating me. But if I'm responsible for putting them there, I'm also responsible for either removing them or changing my relationship with my own irritability so that I no longer am being irritated by that person. And when you gain some confidence in that area, you can do it everywhere in your life. And we keep track of these things and work through that so that we've excavated all of this junk that we've been holding on, baggage, our own baggage. We do more of it. We get our lineage, like our parents, their parents, and down the lineage. And then we start to even go the next level, sometimes into the galactic lineage, and just really let go of all that density that we've stored. As a lot of it's collective. A lot of times we're clearing when we do a lot of this work. I will go into meditations where I'm clearing for the collective, for everybody. And of course I'm part of that, but not just for myself. It's a service to do this work because you're clearing for everyone, because we are all one being at the highest level. So there's this clearing out, and then there's the bringing in all of these wonderful frequencies from the divine, from the universe. Part of that, I have divine light technologies that we work with. And there's the heart portal, which is huge. And I call it the infinitely faceted diamond light of the heart. There's an activation into that. And then we travel through the heart portal everywhere. I mean, all over the galaxy, and forward and backward, past and future, past lives, future lives, because it's all one when you're outside of linear time. And it's a lot of fun. And then we just start picking up the codes and recoding and changing the way that our bodies have been coded since our time here, since our birth and before, and all of our lineage that added to that, our DNA, and start having upgrades. And so it's this whole process of letting go, and not like you let go one time and then it's done. I mean, new layers are always going to come up. It's like the onion. We're always peeling those layers. And when a new layer comes up, yay, celebrate that, because it's an opportunity to clear something else or another layer of the same thing. And then it's just the way that we live. It just becomes a way of living life, and not getting stuck in our density, being willing to let that go and then open up to what is actually possible.
Letting go, boy, I used to refer to that as really dumping the cup, in order for the people that were attending my retreats, so that they understood that in dumping the cup means that there's some shadow work, there's some trauma perhaps that hasn't been let go of yet. And in order to do that and create all that new stuff and that mindset that you were talking about, which I want to get into, but that is all the time that we have for this particular episode. I want to go into part 2 with you. So with Sheila, hang on there, because I want you to come back for part 2 so that we can dig into more about what that means with shadow work and the letting go piece in order for ascension to happen. So we will be back, seekers. Thank you for joining us today. Be sure to tune in again for part 2 of Waxela Sananda, and so that we will definitely let you know, if you subscribe, you'll be notified when the next episode drops. Thanks for joining us today, and come back and see us again. Namaste. Spread the love, and be sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and share the channel with fellow journeyers. The positive vibes will come back to you in abundance. And be sure to join the Divine Journeys Community Facebook group to connect with like-minded seekers. Namaste, my friends.